So sometimes you have geometry that's built in a sort of rigid way and you want to be able to warp and deform it because that's great for doing small little tweaks, or sometimes you want to do something that's would be a little harder to do by adjusting every single point, such as tapering your geometry or twisting your geometry here. And that's what this whole tab here, this deformer tab, is really good at. So let's take a look at what some of these deformers do, and we'll start by putting down a test geometry. I'm just going to go into our geometry here. We're going to use the pig head. So if I press tab and go to test geometry, we will use the pig head here. It's kind of a nice, interesting shape for us to work with. So let's start first with a mountain, because this is kind of the easiest one to see what it does. It makes it look really weird. So what the mountain is doing is it is taking some kind of a fractal noise, and it is pushing each point along its surface normal based on this noise. And you can see that we can make the noise very small scale or very large scale. But it's not just warping it in a certain space, it's warping it in a space that is relative to the direction these surface normals are pointing here. Other than that, there's really not much else to talk about. There's just basically a bunch of different options for the different noise settings and fractal types and all kinds of post-processing and distortion stuff. And whether we want to center the noise or just push the noise out. So now noise has a value between 0 and 1, I think. Center would be between negative 0.5 and positive 0.5. So a lot of these are just variations of one node in here, which I think is a bend. Let me just check it and we'll see. Well, let's go ahead and put a twist down as well. So this gets confusing because they have the exact same icon, which is why I get confused sometimes. But we'll start with a twist first. So a twist, you see we have a primary axis that we're twisting along, and then just a strength. And of course we can move our pivot point and do some interesting things. The other thing about this is that we have these additional bend and shear and taper and kind of other things going on here. And it's not quite as functional for stuff other than twist. I think it's kind of an older SOP. So if I actually did want to bend and taper stuff, I would prefer to use this bend, which you can see that we actually have some kind of a functional UI here, which is awesome, much better than what we get here, which we're not getting. If I go into bend here, we're not really getting the same UI. It just looks a little bit different. So here, when we bend, I'm just going to dial this up, and we can see exactly what's happening. And we have a capture origin, so that's going to be where this first handle is located. So I can move that back. I can keep it in the center. I can kind of localize it around here. We have the direction. That is the direction that this bend is happening. So again, you see that I can kind of change how that's working. And then we have the capture length. So how long we're actually going to be capturing that bend. And then of course our bend. And the cool thing is this has a lot of other options in here, such as twisting, scaling along the bend, and then we also have taper already built in. So you don't even have to use the bend. You can just put that at 0, and then you could just use twisting and tapering if you wanted. So it's a pretty full-featured deformer here. So taper, squish, squash. A lot of nice attributes and stuff here. So the other one that's used a lot is lattices. And some other programs call them freeform deformers or FFDs, but Houdini calls that a lattice. And that basically takes a low-resolution geometry cage around the object, deforms the cage, and then uses that information to deform the underlying mesh. So why don't we do this? We are just going to use the shelf tool here because I think that sets up stuff a little easier for us. So I'm just going to do that, select all the points, and I think I can just press enter and it'll select everything. Or maybe I'm mistaken and I actually do have to select everything. That's fine, if any, and press enter to complete. So there's nothing there. All right, so that sets up everything for us. And what we see here is this. We have a lattice, and we have our bounding box deform. So this is actually not really useful to us because this is basically just doing a transformation. So what we could do is delete that out and instead put down an edit SOP and just put that right in there. And now what happens is if I select the points on this edit SOP here, so we'll select something like that, and maybe this one here, is now I can just grab those points and make little subtle tweaks to my model, just like so.